Hi everybody, I'm James Golding and welcome to Gunroom.tv Food. So today we're going to be cooking venison, and venison is a fantastic lean meat, very healthy and very tasty if you cook it in the right way. Today we're going to be serving our venison with bashed neeps, which is a classic way of serving it. It's basically swede and carrots mixed with a lot of healthy other stuff. We've got some roasted and soused baby beetroots, and we're going to be pan searing our roe buck, which is right in season at the moment, in a little bit of butter with some garlic and thyme. So let's crack on with the neeps. I quite like to boil my neeps. I think you get a much better consistent mash with it. I find that if you roast it, sometimes it goes a little bit lumpy. So peel your carrots. We have our swede here. I probably don't need to use all of this. So for 2 carrots, probably about half a swede. You can use turnip as well if you like. I quite like the sweetness that you get in swede, so I tend to just do the 2. Top and tail, and then with a sharp knife we just peel off that outer layer. And when you're peeling, you can actually see that there's a slight sort of colour discrepancy that shows you it's like a natural line for peeling your swede. And what that does is that stops any sort of fibrous bits from the outer layer getting into your neeps. I'm going to peel half of that and then chop it in half like so. Top and tail your carrots, just because you get little bits of grit in there sometimes. So dicing. It's quite important when you're doing neeps that you actually try to keep the size of the veg relatively uniform, and that's because as it cooks you want it all to cook at the same speed. If you have too many different sizes, then obviously you're going to get lumpy neeps, although we're not going to puree this. The nature of this is that it's bashed. Sometimes you go to restaurants and you see bashed neeps on the menu. That's because we literally just hit it with a masher at the end. So into the pan, get it all in. We're going to put some thyme in there, just a couple of sprigs to add a bit of flavour, and a crushed garlic clove. You don't need to peel it because we're going to take it out before we bash it up anyway. So we're covering these with cold water. Remember, cold water with root vegetables. So cold water with root vegetables is going onto the stove to cook now for around about 10 minutes or until it's tender. So for the baby beetroot, we're going to actually roast these. As you can see, there's quite a lot of sort of earth still left around the top of the beetroot. So we're just going to trim the top off. We're going to place them in a little tray. And the idea is that as these cook, the skins protect the beetroot, but at the same time impart a little bit of sweetness as well. And that's the beauty of roasted beetroot. If you've got a wood oven, you can actually wood roast these, or some people actually like to put them directly into the coals of the barbecue, and they work really well. You can char the outside and then wrap them in foil, and they just give a fantastic rich sweet flavour. So I'm going to cover these with some cold pressed rapeseed oil. This is from our friends over in Hampshire. Charlie, great guy, produces some really good quality rapeseed. Bit of pepper, a few sprigs of thyme, and obviously some garlic. So what will happen is that as these cook, the juices will come out the beetroot and they'll create a lovely kind of dressing in the bottom of the pan. So one thing that I'm going to also add a sprinkle of is this black garlic vinegar, and this is from Yardley. These are also a Hampshire-based company, and this is a bit like a sort of a bit like a kind of balsamic almost, but it's got almost pickled walnutty flavour to it. So I'm just going to put a tiny dash in now, and we're going to add some more in when they come out. So these are going into a preheated oven at 180 degrees for around about 20 minutes. About sort of 10 minutes now. We're just going to cover them with foil, and what that does is it keeps the juices in the pan and allows us to create that lovely dressing that I spoke about earlier. So there we go, and straight back in. We've got this fantastic piece of venison. This is taken from a roe buck, and we've taken it from the haunch. So basically, as the thigh comes down and meets the knee, we've taken that fantastic piece of meat from the back of the leg there. It's very important that you try and get as much sinew out of this as possible, but when we slice it, we're going to slice through the sinew anyway. As you can see, I've left a little bit on here, and let's just show you how to basically get it off. So just hook your knife underneath, lift that up, and you can just seam butcher that little piece out. And that's how simple it is. Very, very easy. We're going to season it with sea salt, some of our blackthorn salt, quite liberally, and a good crack of black pepper, both sides. So on that goes. Same again, and we're going to get this in a nice red hot pan and get it in the oven. So off we go. You can actually leave this to absorb all the salt and pepper for a few minutes if you like, but I quite like to get it straight in there. Obviously, the longer you leave the salt on there, the more time that it will pull moisture out. Into a nice hot pan. That's the sound, as we know. Let's give it a good old mix around. I'm going to add in this thyme and a crushed garlic clove. And the idea is that that'll impart a lovely bit of flavour onto the venison while it's cooking. Now, venison cooks quite quickly, so I don't actually want to seal this both sides on the stove top. What I'm going to do is get a lovely colour one side, flip it over, and then let the pan do its work in the oven. Bit more veg oil. You're going to let that colour up nicely. So it's just starting to get lovely and golden brown. And the one thing about venison is you can sort of treat it very similar to beef. It's very important that you get that flavour on now so that you get the fantastic juices flowing out of it when it's cooking. Obviously, venison is a lot leaner than beef, so you don't want to overcook this. If you overcook the venison, trust me, it'll be tough. So it's very important that you set a timer for this and you make sure that you get it out and get it resting when it's ready to go. So we're getting a nice bit of colour now on this. I'm just going to flip this over now, put it in the oven, and it'll probably go in for around 6 minutes at 186 degrees centigrade, and then we'll give it a good rest. So, see you in a minute. Okay, so now it's time for the neeps. So these have been boiling for around 25 minutes, and you want them falling apart essentially. You don't want any lumps in this, but you do want it to be rough. I know that doesn't really make sense, but you'll see what I'm saying in a second. So we're going to add in a small amount of butter, probably about a tablespoon, into the pan. Good pinch of blackthorn salt, and crush them. Now, again, you could use a ricer. You could put this through, you know, a coarse ricer, and that would work just as well. I find that the potato masher works perfectly, and it gives it that sort of effect of being bashed rather than, you know, sort of finely squeezed. So that can go in there. So that's the consistency we're looking for. And to this we're going to add a really, really good amount of black pepper, and for me it's the black pepper that makes the neeps. I think that was probably about enough. So good old mix around, and we're going to set that back on the stove just to stay warm while we prep the beetroots. So these beetroots have been resting now for a few minutes, and we just want to peel off this outer layer of skin. And it's a bit like a tomato really, a bit like a sort of blanched tomato. You just start at the top and it will naturally just peel off quite easily. You want them to be tender really, you don't want them to be overcooked. It's quite important that they have a bit of a bite to them because this is going to be our dressing. So we'll peel off Probably 2 of them, I think, would probably be enough for this dish. Also, you can see now why we took off the tops and some of the tails, because if you were peeling them now, all of that dirt and sort of grit that was sitting in the top of the beet would now be getting into this lovely, perfectly roasted beetroot. So, you know, it's quite important not to let those get in there. I'm going to take these out, and you can see this liquid. So like I said, the juice has come out of this liquid. Don't forget we put in the black garlic vinegar, and this is going to be the base of our dressing. So that's going into our bowl. I have put on a glove. From years of working with beetroot, trust me, if you have any plastic gloves, it's best to use them for this dish. We're going to slice this probably about 1/2 centimetre into little kind of chunks or cubes, and this is going to be the base of our dressing. And beetroot works so well with venison. Anything that has an earthy flavour. I mean, in the autumn time we use sloes and damsons. They work so well with the gaminess of venison. And this roebuck, it's only been hung for about a week, so it's not super gamey. Some people like it hung in the jacket for a long time. Personally, I don't like to overdo it. I think it's quite important to have, you know, a bit of that kind of freshness to the meat. The more gamey, the more sort of overpowering it becomes. Move that. Okay, into the dressing. Do these last few bits. That should do it. And now we're going to add in some rapeseed oil, good crack of black pepper, some more salt just to correct the seasoning, and another dash of our Yati black garlic vinegar. There we go. Not too much, it's quite sweet. So mix that together, and we're going to set that aside while we sort out the venison. So the venison's been out the oven now and it's been resting. We're going to start putting the dish together. So into the dressing I'm going to add in some chopped flat leaf parsley, and this will give the dish a lovely vibrancy when we dress it. You don't want to chop this too heavily. Literally just run your knife through it and into the dressing. Our venison, so you can feel that we want it to be around sort of medium rare to medium. Depends on how you like it. Personally, I like it more medium rare. And we're going to slice this on the angle, so not straight down and not this way. You want to kind of see which way the muscle fibers are running, and if they're running across, you want to chop straight down and to an angle, 45 degrees. So off we go. And I quite like it quite thin. I think it's, you know, with the haunch, it's quite important that you cut through any bits of sinew that you may have missed when you were trimming it up. So the thinner it is, the better chance you have of getting a really good tender piece of meat, and that looks perfect. So take that off of that cloth onto there, get rid of that. We'll grab our Neeps, which we've been keeping warm on the stove. So we're going to do a rough cornel with this. So it's basically a fancy word for a nice dollop. So cornel in the middle of the plate. Our venison neatly placed on top. And then this fantastic beetroot and black garlic vinaigrette just scattered over the top, and then a little bit dressed around, and there we go. That's my venison with bash Neeps with a beetroot and black garlic vinaigrette.